You know what's worse than being lied to? It's that moment when you realize you wanted to believe the lie more than you wanted to know the truth. I spent 3 months sending money to a dying grandmother who was probably getting drunk on my donations, while her granddaughter counted my cash. But here's the thing, even after I found out, part of me still wanted to keep sending it. Because admitting you've been played means admitting you were desperate enough to fall for it in the first place. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by one of our longtime viewers. He asked us not to share his name, but he wanted other expats to hear what really happens when loneliness makes you stupid. I was sitting in that internet cafe on Beach Road, staring at my phone like it was some alien device. 3 months in Pattaya and I still couldn't figure out how to change my data plan without accidentally buying ringtones or something equally ridiculous. The divorce papers were finally signed. My pension was clearing into my Thai bank account, and I was supposed to be living this retired expat dream. Instead, I felt like a tourist in my own life. "Excuse me? You need help?" The voice was soft, careful. I looked up to see a young Thai woman standing beside my table, dressed in a simple white blouse and dark jeans. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed bar girl or tourist trap. She had kind eyes and spoke English with that careful precision that comes from actually studying it, not just picking up phrases from drunk foreigners. "Yeah, actually," I said, holding up my phone. "I'm trying to figure out how to get more data without accidentally signing up for premium karaoke services." She laughed, and it wasn't that forced giggle you hear so often here. It was genuine. "May I?" She gestured to the chair across from me, and I nodded. She sat down and held out her hand for my phone. "I help you. This system very confusing for foreigners." Her name was Wipawan, she told me while navigating through my phone settings with practiced ease. She worked as a freelance translator, mostly for small businesses that needed help with English correspondence. "Not exciting work," she said with a smile, "but good for flexible schedule." "That must be useful here," I said. "I imagine a lot of expats need help with translation." "Some," she said, handing my phone back. "But I mostly work with Thai companies. Expat men usually just want someone to talk to bar girls for them." There was no judgment in her voice, just matter-of-fact observation. I appreciated that. No sales pitch, no immediate invitation for drinks, no fishing for information about my financial situation, just a straightforward conversation with someone who seemed genuinely helpful. It had been a long time since I'd talked to a woman who wasn't either my divorce lawyer or someone trying to sell me something. "There," she said, showing me the screen. "Now you have 10 GB for the month. Should be enough unless you're watching Netflix all day." "How much do I owe you?" I asked, reaching for my wallet. She waved her hand dismissively. "Nothing. Just helping. Maybe you help someone else sometime." I was taken aback. After 6 months of legal battles where every conversation had a price tag, someone doing something nice without expecting payment felt almost suspicious. "You just saved me probably hours of frustration." "I'm sure," she said, standing up. "But if you need help again, here." She wrote her line ID on a napkin. "For real help only. Not for other things." I understood what she meant. "Just translation and technical support," I said. "I promise." She smiled and gathered her things. I watched her leave, noting that she didn't look back, didn't linger, didn't do any of the things I'd come to expect from women who approached foreign men in this city. She just helped and left. It was refreshing in a way that made me realize how cynical I'd become. That night, I found myself thinking about the interaction. Not in any romantic way. She was young enough to be my daughter, and I wasn't looking for that kind of complication. But there was something about talking to someone who didn't seem to want anything from me that felt like a small miracle. After 32 years of marriage that ended with my ex-wife taking half of everything and most of my dignity, genuine human kindness felt like discovering water in a desert. I saved her line ID in my phone but didn't message her. I wasn't ready to test whether her offer of help was real or just another angle I hadn't recognized yet. Trust, I was learning, was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. 2 days later, my landlord handed me a lease renewal form, written entirely in Thai. I stared at it for 20 minutes before remembering the napkin in my wallet. "Hi," I typed to Wipperwan. "It's Malcolm from the internet cafe. I have a rental agreement that might as well be written in hieroglyphics. Would you have time to help translate it?" Her response came back within an hour. "Of course. Can you send photo of document?" I snapped pictures of all 3 pages and sent them over. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a detailed breakdown of every clause, including her notes about which parts seemed standard and which ones I should question. She'd even highlighted a section where the landlord was trying to charge me for utilities that should have been included. "This is incredibly helpful," I wrote back. "Thank you so much. What do I owe you?" "Nothing," came the reply. "But if you sign this, make sure you remove clause 7. Landlord trying to charge you twice for electricity. At least let me buy you coffee," I typed. "I feel bad taking your time for free." "Maybe another time. Very busy this week with work project. But happy to help." Over the next 2 weeks, Wipperwan became my unofficial cultural translator. When my motorbike started making alarming noises, she recommended a mechanic who was honest and spoke enough English to explain what was wrong. When I needed to open a proper Thai bank account, she provided a list of required documents and warned me about which fees were legitimate and which were attempts to overcharge foreigners. She never asked for payment, never suggested meeting for drinks, never pushed for anything beyond helping with practical problems. When I offered to pay her for her translation work, she politely declined. When I suggested dinner as a thank you, she said she was usually too busy with work and taking care of her grandmother. "Your grandmother lives with you?" I asked during one of our brief phone conversations. "Not with me," Wipperwan said, "but close by. She raised me after my parents died. Now she's getting older, needs more help. That must be difficult, working and caring for family." "Is okay. She took care of me. Now I take care of her, is how family works." There was something in her voice when she talked about her grandmother, a tenderness that seemed genuine. It reminded me of how my own daughter used to talk about my mother before Alzheimer's took her away from us. Family obligation mixed with real love. I started to relax around Wipperwan in a way I hadn't expected. She wasn't trying to be my girlfriend, wasn't angling for financial support, wasn't even particularly interested in spending time with me beyond helping with practical matters. She was just a decent person who happened to be willing to help a confused foreigner navigate Thai bureaucracy. After 2 weeks of sporadic but helpful contact, I realized I was looking forward to her messages, not because I had problems that needed solving, but because talking to her felt normal. She asked how my day was, shared funny stories about difficult translation clients, and generally treated me like a human being rather than a walking ATM or a potential romantic conquest. "You're very kind to help me so much," I told her during a phone call about renewing my visa. "Most people would charge for this kind of assistance. Most people here see foreigners as customers," she said. "I see you as person. Is different." "Well, I appreciate being seen as a person," I said. "It's been a while since that happened." "You sound sad when you say that." I paused, surprised by her perceptiveness. "I suppose I am. Divorce isn't exactly a confidence booster." "I'm sorry. Must be very hard." It was. Still is. Some days. But being here helps. Having friends like you helps. "I'm glad," she said simply. "Everyone needs friends." There was a comfortable silence before she continued. "I should go. Grandmother needs her medicine, and pharmacy closes soon." "Of course. Thank you again for everything." "Is nothing. Talk soon." I hung up feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Grateful, not just for the practical help, but for the simple, human connection. Wipperwan treated me like I mattered without wanting anything in return. In a city where every interaction seemed transactional, that felt like a gift. I was starting to trust her, and that terrified me almost as much as it comforted me. 3 weeks into our friendship, Wipawan's messages became irregular. Usually, she responded to my texts within a few hours, but suddenly I was waiting a day or more for replies. When she did respond, her messages were shorter, less detailed. "Everything okay?" I finally asked. "You seem distracted lately." The response took 12 hours. "Sorry, many problems right now. Very stressed. Anything I can help with?" Another long delay. "Family problems. Nothing you can do, but thank you." I didn't push, but something in my gut told me this wasn't just work stress or everyday family drama. I'd learned to read between the lines during my marriage, and Wipawan's sudden change in communication pattern felt significant. 2 days later, she called me at 11 p.m. I could hear she'd been crying. "Malcolm, I'm sorry to call so late." "Don't apologize." "What's wrong?" "It's my grandmother," she said, her voice breaking. "She's very sick. Hospital found cancer." The words hit me like a physical blow. I'd lost both my parents to cancer, watched them waste away despite the best medical care money could buy. "Oh, Wipawan, I'm so sorry. What kind of cancer?" "Stomach cancer. Very advanced. Doctor says maybe 6 months. Maybe less if we don't do treatment." "If? What do you mean if?" "Treatment is very expensive. Surgery, chemotherapy, all the medicines. We don't have money for everything." I could hear her trying to control her tears, the same sound my daughter had made when we'd gotten my mother's diagnosis. "Where is she now?" "Bangkok Hospital. They did tests yesterday. She's scared, Malcolm. She raised me after my parents died in motorcycle accident. She's only family I have." "Jesus, Wipawan. I had no idea about your parents." "Was long time ago. I was 12. Grandmother took me in, gave me everything, worked 2 jobs to send me to university. Now she needs help, and I can't." Her voice broke completely. I found myself gripping the phone tighter. "What did the doctors say exactly?" "Tumor is big. Needs surgery first. Then chemotherapy. They want to start next week, but..." She trailed off. "But what?" "Hospital wants deposit before surgery. 50,000 baht. Then more money for each chemotherapy treatment. I have some savings, but not enough. I'm trying to borrow from friends, from my boss. But everyone has their own problems. 50,000 baht. About $1,500. For me, it was 2 weeks of pension payments. For her, working as a freelance translator, it might as well have been 50 million. "Can I see her?" I asked. "I'd like to pay my respects. You want to visit her?" "If it's appropriate. I know how important she is to you." Wipawan was quiet for a moment. "She would like that. She always wants to meet my friends. But Malcolm, she's very sick. Looks very different now." "I understand. I've been through this with my own family." "Tomorrow? I can meet you at hospital." "Of course. Text me the address." "Thank you," she whispered. "Just having friend there will help." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment thinking about my own mother's final months. The helplessness of watching someone you love slip away. The desperate hope that money could somehow buy more time, more comfort, more dignity in the face of an implacable enemy. I'd been fortunate enough to afford the best care for my mother, but it hadn't mattered in the end. Cancer took her anyway. At least I'd never had to watch her suffer because I couldn't afford treatment. The next morning, I met Wipawan at Bangkok Hospital. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept in days. Her usual careful grooming was replaced by the disheveled appearance of someone whose world had just shifted dramatically. "How is she today?" I asked as we walked through the hospital corridors. "Weak. The medicine makes her sick, but she's trying to be strong for me." We stopped outside a room in the oncology ward. Through the window, I could see an elderly Thai woman lying in bed, connected to various monitors and IV drips. She looked exactly like the kind of grandmother who would sacrifice everything for her family. "Grandma," Wipawan said softly in Thai as we entered. The old woman's eyes opened, and she smiled weakly when she saw Wipawan. Wipawan introduced me in Thai, and the grandmother nodded politely. She spoke a few words, and Wipawan translated. She says thank you for being kind to me. She's grateful I have good friend. I felt a stab of emotion I hadn't expected. This woman was dying, facing enormous medical bills, and she was worried about her granddaughter having friends. Tell her I'm honored to know you both. The grandmother spoke again, longer this time, with more urgency. She says she's not afraid to die, but she's afraid to leave me alone. She wants to see me settled, happy. Tell her you're strong. You'll be okay, Wipawan translated, and the grandmother smiled. She reached out and patted my hand, speaking in rapid Thai. She says you have kind eyes. She can tell you're a good man. I had to look away for a moment. This woman didn't know me at all, but she was giving me the kind of unconditional approval I'd stopped believing existed. We stayed for an hour. The grandmother drifted in and out of sleep, but when she was awake, she was alert and engaged. She showed me photos of Wipawan as a child, spoke proudly about her granddaughter's university degree, worried about the cost of her medical care. In the hallway afterward, Wipawan was quiet. She looks exactly like my own grandmother did, I told her. Same spirit, same worry about family. Doctor wants to start surgery Monday. I told him I need more time to find money. How much do you have? 20,000. Need 30,000 more for deposit. Then more for each treatment. I made a decision that felt both completely natural and terrifying. I want to help. Malcolm, no. I can't ask you for money. You're not asking. I'm offering. I've been where you are. I know what it's like to watch families suffer and feel helpless. Is too much money. I could never pay back. I'm not asking you to pay it back. I'm asking you to let me help someone who's been kind to me. Wipawan started crying again. I don't know what to say. Let me transfer the money today so you can schedule the surgery. Malcolm, I don't deserve this. Your grandmother deserves the best care available. You deserve not to have to choose between her health and financial ruin. That afternoon, I transferred 50,000 baht to Wipawan's account. She called me 3 hours later, sobbing with relief. Surgery is scheduled for Wednesday. Doctor says if we caught it early enough, treatment could give her years. That's wonderful news. I don't know how to thank you. Take care of her. Take care of yourself. That's thanks enough. But even as I said it, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time in months, I felt useful. Needed. Like my money could do something meaningful instead of just paying for my own comfortable exile. I didn't realize it yet, but I was already becoming emotionally invested in Wipawan's grandmother's recovery, and that investment was about to cost me much more than 50,000 baht. The surgery went well, according to Wipawan. The doctors were able to remove most of the tumor, and her grandmother was responding better than expected to the initial treatment. But recovery was slow, and the chemotherapy schedule was aggressive. Doctor says she needs 12 rounds of chemotherapy, Wipawan told me during a video call from the hospital. Each round costs 15,000 baht. I did the math quickly. 12 rounds at 15,000 each was 180, 0 baht, about $5,500. For me, it was manageable. For Wipawan, it was impossible. That's a lot, I said carefully. How much can you cover? Maybe 4 or 5 treatments. After that, she shrugged helplessly. I was learning that Wipawan never directly asked for money. She would present the facts, explain the situation, and let me draw my own conclusions. It was a more sophisticated approach than I'd expected, and it made me feel like I was making my own decisions rather than being manipulated. What happens if she can't complete all 12 rounds? Doctor says cancer will come back. Maybe stronger. The choice was obvious to me. I'd already committed to helping. Stopping halfway would be worse than never starting. I'll cover the treatments. Malcolm, that's too much. I can't let you spend so much money. I can afford it, I said, which was true. And I want to help. But why? Why do this for people you barely know? It was a fair question, and I found myself thinking about it seriously. Because I can. Because you've been kind to me. Because watching your family suffer when I have the power to help feels wrong. You are a very good man. I'm a man with more money than I need, and no family to spend it on. This feels like something my money should be used for. Over the next month, I sent money for 4 chemotherapy treatments. Each time, Whippawan sent me receipts from the hospital, photos of her grandmother during treatment, and updates on her progress. The old woman was tolerating the chemotherapy better than expected, and her appetite was returning. Doctor is very optimistic, Whippawan told me. Says she's responding well. Maybe full recovery possible. I found myself checking my phone constantly for updates, feeling genuinely invested in this woman's recovery. When Whippawan sent photos of her grandmother sitting up in bed, smiling, I felt a satisfaction I hadn't experienced in years. She asks about you every day, Whippawan said during one of our calls. Wants to know when you'll visit again. I'd like to see her again. How is she feeling? Tired, but hopeful. She says knowing she has Angel watching over her makes treatment easier. The word angel hit me unexpectedly hard. No one had ever called me that before. After a divorce that painted me as selfish and emotionally unavailable, being seen as someone's guardian angel felt like redemption. But as the treatments continued, the costs began to escalate. Emergency medications when her white blood cell count dropped too low. Additional scans to monitor progress. Nutritional supplements to help her body handle the chemotherapy. Each expense was reasonable individually, but they added up quickly. I'm sorry there are so many extra costs, Whippawan said during a particularly expensive week. Doctor says is normal, but I know you weren't expecting this much. It's fine, I said, though I was starting to feel the strain. I'd sent over 150, baht at this point. Nearly $5,000. Not enough to ruin me, but enough to make me conscious of every expenditure. You sure? I feel terrible asking for more and more money. You're not asking. I'm offering. There's a difference. Still, is so much. Maybe I should try to borrow some money. Take pressure off you. Absolutely not. I told you I'd help. And I meant it. Your grandmother's health is more important than money. But even as I said it, I was calculating how long I could maintain this level of spending. My pension was comfortable for one person living modestly in Thailand, but supporting 2 people through a major medical crisis was stretching my budget in ways I hadn't anticipated. The emotional cost was even higher. I was checking my phone dozens of times a day for updates from Whippawan. When she was late responding to messages, I worried something had gone wrong. When she sent good news, I felt elated. When the news was concerning, I felt genuinely anxious. I was becoming emotionally attached to these people in a way that felt both wonderful and dangerous. For the first time since my divorce, I felt like I mattered to someone. Whippawan relied on me, trusted me, included me in the most important thing happening in her life. Her grandmother asked about me, appreciated my help, considered me family. It was intoxicating to feel needed after feeling discarded for so long. But some quiet part of my mind wondered if I was crossing a line from helping to becoming dependent on being helpful. The distinction was important, though I wasn't ready to examine it too closely yet. Malcolm? Whippawan said during one of our late-night calls. She sounded different, more tired, more emotional. Yes? I need to tell you something. My heart rate spiked. Is your grandmother okay? She's okay, but I'm not okay. What's wrong? I'm scared. I'm scared of losing her, scared of not having enough money for treatment, scared of asking too much from you. You're not asking too much. But I am. Tonight I counted how much money you've sent, and I feel sick. Is too much for anyone to spend on strangers. You're not strangers anymore. You're friends. Family helps family. But I'm not your family. I'm just some girl you met in internet cafe. You're someone who's been kind to me when I needed kindness. Someone who's let me be part of something important when I was feeling useless. That matters more than blood. Wipawan was crying now. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve friend like you. Yes, you do. And your grandmother deserves every chance at recovery. Promise me something? What? If this becomes too much, if I ask for too much money, promise you'll tell me. Promise you won't hurt yourself to help us. I promise, I said, though I wasn't sure what would constitute too much anymore. The line between helping and self-harm had become blurrier than I'd expected. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment doing calculations. If the remaining treatments went smoothly, I'd spend close to 300, 0 baht total, nearly $10,000. It wouldn't bankrupt me, but it would change my lifestyle significantly. More concerning was how much I needed these conversations with Wipawan. Her calls had become the highlight of my days. Her gratitude made me feel valuable in a way I'd forgotten was possible. The thought of her grandmother's recovery gave me something to hope for, beyond my own small concerns. I was walking a tightrope between generosity and addiction, between helping and needing to be needed, and I was starting to suspect I was on the wrong side of that line. But every time Wipawan sent a photo of her grandmother looking stronger, every time she called to share good news from the doctors, every time she told me how grateful they both were, I pushed those concerns aside. This was what money was for. Helping people, making a difference, being part of something larger than yourself. At least, that's what I told myself as I prepared to send another 15,000 baht for the next round of chemotherapy. The night calls started during her grandmother's 6th week of treatment. Wipawan would call me at midnight or later, crying, exhausted from spending long hours at the hospital. I can't do this anymore, she sobbed during one particularly difficult call. She's so sick from the chemotherapy, she can't keep food down, can't sleep. Sometimes I think the treatment is worse than the cancer. But the doctors say she's responding well, right? Yes. But seeing her suffer, I feel like I'm torturing her. You're saving her life. That's what matters. Is it? What if she dies anyway? What if all this money, all this pain, is for nothing? I found myself in the unfamiliar position of providing emotional support for someone going through hell. It was intimate in a way I hadn't expected. Wipawan trusted me with her deepest fears, her guilt, her exhaustion. She called me when she couldn't call anyone else. My friends don't understand, she told me. They think I should just accept that she's old, that cancer at her age is natural. They don't understand what she means to me. Tell me about her, I said. Tell me about growing up with her. And she did. Late-night conversations about learning to cook in her grandmother's kitchen, about the grandmother working 2 jobs to pay for Wipawan's school clothes, about the old woman teaching her to read English using children's books she bought from street vendors. She used to say education was the only thing no one could take away from me, Wipawan said. She worked so hard so I could go to university. She sounds remarkable. She is. She never remarried after my grandfather died. Said she had me to take care of, didn't need husband. Her whole life was about making sure I had opportunities she never had. These conversations were drawing us closer together in ways that had nothing to do with money. I was learning about Wipawan's childhood, her fears, her dreams. She was sharing pieces of herself that felt precious and private. Malcolm? Yes? Can I ask you something personal? Of course. Why you never had children? The question caught me off guard. We tried, my ex-wife and I. It just never happened. You would have been good father. How can you tell? Because you care for my grandmother like she's your own family. Shows what kind of heart you have. I had to pause for a moment. No one had ever told me I would have been a good father. My ex-wife had blamed our childlessness on my emotional unavailability, my selfishness, my inability to put anyone else's needs first. Thank you for saying that. Is true. Grandmother says same thing. Says you have father's heart. After these late-night conversations, I would lie awake thinking about how long it had been since anyone had needed me emotionally. My ex-wife had made her own decisions, solved her own problems, lived her own life alongside mine rather than with mine. Being someone's emotional anchor felt foreign and essential at the same time. During the day, Whipperwan would send me updates from the hospital. Photos of her grandmother eating soup. Videos of the old woman talking to her in Thai, always ending with a wave toward the camera meant for me. Updates from doctors showing that the tumors were shrinking. Doctor says 2 more treatments and we can take break. Whipperwan texted. See how body responds. That's great news. How is she feeling? Stronger every day. Today she asked when you're coming to visit. Says she wants to cook for you when she's well. The idea of this sick old woman planning to cook for me was almost overwhelming. I'd gone from being someone's unwanted ex-husband to being someone's adopted family member. The transformation felt miraculous. But as we approached the end of the initial treatment plan, new complications arose. Secondary infections from weakened immunity, the need for additional scans to check for cancer spread, medications to manage treatment side effects. I'm sorry, Whipperwan said during another late-night call. Doctor says she needs stronger antibiotics, very expensive ones. I tried to find cheaper options, but… How much? 25,000 baht. I know is a lot. Maybe we can wait. See if infection goes away on its own. Absolutely not. We're not taking risks with her health over money. Malcolm, you've already spent so much. I counted yesterday. Over 200 baht is too much. It's not too much if it saves her life. But what if it doesn't? What if she gets sick again? What if cancer comes back? I can't keep taking your money forever. We'll deal with whatever comes next when it comes. Right now, she needs antibiotics. I transferred the money that night, but for the first time, I felt a flutter of anxiety about my bank balance. Not panic. Not yet, but awareness that this couldn't continue indefinitely. More troubling was the realization that I didn't want it to end. These conversations with Whipperwan had become the most meaningful part of my life. Her reliance on me, her gratitude, her late-night calls when she needed someone to listen. It all made me feel valuable in a way I'd forgotten was possible. I was starting to suspect that I needed to help them more than they needed my help, and that thought scared me more than any amount of money ever could. She wants to see you, Whipperwan said during our next call. Keeps asking when you're coming back to hospital. I'll come tomorrow, I said. I want to see how she's doing. Malcolm? Yes? Thank you. For everything. I know I say it all the time, but I mean it. Without you, she would be dead already. I'm just glad I can help. You're not just helping. You're saving us. Both of us. After we hung up, I realized that being someone's savior was the most addictive feeling I'd ever experienced. More powerful than alcohol, more compelling than any drug, more necessary than food or sleep. I was saving them. And in the process, I was losing myself. Something started nagging at me during the 8th week of treatment. Little things, inconsistencies that my insurance adjuster brain couldn't quite dismiss. Whipperwan mentioned she was working at a small translation office downtown, but when I offered to take her lunch one day, she said she was working from home that week. When I suggested meeting at her office another time, she said they'd moved locations and she didn't have the new address yet. I told myself I was being paranoid. The stress of caring for a dying relative would make anyone's schedule irregular. But 30 years of investigating insurance claims had taught me to notice patterns, and some patterns were starting to emerge. How's work going? I asked during one of our calls. Are your clients understanding about your grandmother's situation? Most are. I had to give up some projects. But boss is very understanding. That's good. What kind of company is it again? Small business translations? Mostly contracts and correspondence. Sounds interesting. What's the company name? Maybe I'll need translation services myself someday. There was a pause. It's called Bangkok Translation Services. Very small company. I made a mental note of the name, but didn't think much of it until I was driving through downtown Bangkok a few days later and saw a sign for Bangkok Translation Services. On impulse, I parked and went inside. I'm looking for Whipper1, I told the receptionist. I have some translation work for her. The young woman looked confused. I'm sorry, no one by that name works here. Are you sure? She told me she works for Bangkok Translation Services. We have 3 translators here, all full-time. No Whipper1. I thanked her and left, my mind racing. There could be explanations. Maybe she freelanced for them. Maybe she used a different name professionally. Maybe I'd misunderstood something. But the insurance investigator in me was fully awake now, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That night, I decided to do some basic verification of the medical information Whipper1 had been sharing. I'd been accepting everything at face value, but my professional training suggested I should at least confirm the basic facts. I started with the hospital. A quick online search showed that Bangkok Hospital was real, well-regarded, and did treat cancer patients. That was reassuring. But when I looked more closely at the receipts Whipper1 had been sending me, I noticed some oddities. The formatting seemed slightly off compared to official Bangkok Hospital documents I found online. The fonts didn't quite match. Some of the medical terminology seemed imprecise in ways that suggested machine translation rather than professional medical documentation. I told myself I was overthinking things. Hospitals probably use different formats for different departments. Translation issues were common in Thailand. My paranoia was a professional hazard, not evidence of wrongdoing, but I couldn't stop myself from digging deeper. The next morning, I drove to Bangkok Hospital and asked about visiting hours for cancer patients. The information desk was helpful, professional, and gave me detailed visiting guidelines. Almost casually, I asked about patient information. I'm trying to visit a friend's grandmother, I said. I have her name, but I want to make sure I have the right room number. What's the patient's name? I gave them the name Whipper1 had told me her grandmother was registered under. The woman searched her computer for several minutes. I'm sorry, we don't have any patient by that name currently admitted. Maybe she was discharged? She was here for cancer treatment. Let me check recent discharges. More typing. No, I'm not finding anyone by that name in our system. My hands were starting to shake. Maybe she's registered under a different name. Her granddaughter is Whipper1, if that helps. I'm sorry, I can't find any records for either name. I thanked her and walked out of the hospital in a daze. There had to be an explanation. Maybe they were at a different hospital. Maybe the grandmother was registered under a different name. Maybe privacy laws prevented the desk clerk from finding her. But deep down, I was starting to suspect that my professional instincts were right, and the human side of me that wanted to believe in genuine connection was wrong. That afternoon, I did something I'd been resisting for weeks. I hired a private investigator. As a retired insurance adjuster, I knew several good PIs in Bangkok, expats who specialized in helping other foreigners verify information. I called one I'd worked with before, a former Australian police officer named Greg who was thorough, discreet, and honest. I need you to check on someone for me, I told him. Quietly. Suspicious girlfriend? He asked. Something like that. I need to verify employment, medical information, family details. The usual. How deep do you want me to go? As deep as necessary, but be discreet. If I'm wrong, I don't want to hurt innocent people. And if you're right, then I need to know exactly how stupid I've been. Greg quoted me his standard rate and promised to have preliminary information within 48 hours. As I hung up, I felt like I was betraying Whipper1 and her grandmother. But I also felt like I was finally protecting myself from my own desperate need to be needed. The next day, Wippawan called with news about her grandmother's latest test results. "Doctor says chemotherapy is working very well," she said, her voice bright with hope. "Tumor is much smaller. Maybe only need 2 more treatments." "That's wonderful news," I said, but the words felt hollow. I was listening to her voice differently now, analyzing rather than simply accepting. "Grandmother asks when you visit again. Says she misses talking to you." "Soon," I said. "I've been busy with some personal matters." "Everything okay with you?" "Just paperwork stuff, nothing serious." But everything wasn't okay. I was caught between wanting to believe Wippawan and wanting to protect myself. Every conversation now felt like evidence gathering rather than emotional connection. The spontaneous joy I'd felt when she shared good news was replaced by analytical distance. "Malcolm? You sound different today." "Just tired. It's been a long week. Maybe you working too hard. Should take better care of yourself." Her concern sounded genuine, but I found myself wondering if that was just another performance. Had any of it been real? The late-night calls, the emotional intimacy, the gratitude, the grandmother's blessing. Was it all calculated manipulation designed to keep me sending money? "I should go," I said. "Have a good day." "Okay. Talk tonight?" "Maybe. I'll call you if I can." I didn't call that night, or the next night. I told myself I needed space to think. But really I was just scared of what I might discover about myself if the investigation confirmed my suspicions. Greg called me on the 3rd day. "We need to meet," he said. "You're not going to like what I found." We met at a quiet coffee shop in Sukhumvit. Greg spread a manila folder across the table between us. "Your girl Wippawan doesn't work for any translation company," he said without preamble. "She works at a beer bar on Walking Street in Pattaya. Has for about 2 years. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "Are you sure?" "Positive. Here's photos of her at work from 3 nights ago." He showed me pictures of Wippawan in a bar uniform, serving drinks to foreign men, laughing and chatting with customers. "Maybe she has 2 jobs," I said weakly. "Malcolm, there's more. The hospital receipts she's been sending you. They're fake. Good fakes, but fake. The grandmother she's been telling you about, I can't find any record of her existence." "What do you mean?" "I mean there's no sick grandmother. The photos she's been sending you are stock medical images from a Thai health website. I found the originals online." Greg pulled out more documents. "The Bangkok hospital has no record of any patient by the name she gave you. The medical procedures she's been describing don't match actual cancer treatment protocols. And here's the kicker." He handed me a series of photos that made my blood freeze. Wippawan at a beach party on Pattaya Island, laughing and drinking with a group of friends. She was wearing a bikini, clearly healthy and happy, surrounded by other young Thai women and several Western men who looked exactly like me, older, alone, wealthy enough to be worth targeting. "When were these taken?" "Last Tuesday night. The same night she called you crying from the hospital about her grandmother's setback." I stared at the photos. In them, Wippawan looked carefree, relaxed. Nothing like the exhausted granddaughter she'd been portraying to me. She was holding a beer, her arm around another Thai woman, both of them laughing at something one of the Western men had said. "There's more," Greg said gently. "I talked to some people who know her. This isn't her first time running this particular scam. She's got it down to a science. Find lonely expats, build emotional connection, introduce the sick relative, let them offer to help rather than asking directly." How many others? At least 3 that I could confirm in the past year. Probably more. I felt like I was going to be sick. "How much money?" "From you?" "I estimate around 300. 0 baht, based on the bank transfers I was able to trace." "From everyone?" "Hard to say. But this is her full-time job. She's probably making more from this than most university graduates make in legitimate work. I closed the folder and pushed it away. Jesus Christ. I'm sorry, mate. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. Actually, part of me is relieved. I'd been starting to suspect something was wrong, but I was afraid I was being paranoid. Your instincts were right. The question now is, what you want to do about it? What did I want to do? Report her to the police? Demand my money back? Confront her with the evidence? Or just disappear and chalk it up to an expensive lesson? She's good at this, I said, looking through the photos again. I completely believed her. That's why it works. She's not just taking your money. She's giving you something you needed, the feeling of being important, of being needed, of making a difference in someone's life. So, I was paying for emotional connection. In a way, yeah. But Malcolm, that doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. I left the coffee shop with the folder under my arm and a sick feeling in my stomach. But it wasn't just betrayal I was feeling. It was also shame at how much I'd needed what Whippawan was selling. The money hurt, but the realization that I'd been desperate enough to buy intimacy hurt worse. My phone buzzed with a message from Whippawan. Haven't heard from you in few days. Everything okay? Grandmother. Asking about you. For the first time, I could see the message for what it was, not genuine concern, but professional follow-up from someone whose income depended on maintaining my emotional investment. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. We need to talk. Of course. When? Tonight. Meet me at the restaurant where we had coffee that first day. Okay. Looking forward to seeing you. Looking forward to seeing me. Right. Looking forward to seeing my wallet. I spent the rest of the day deciding how to handle the confrontation. Part of me wanted to just ghost her, disappear without explanation, and let her figure out that the money had dried up. But I needed closure. I needed to hear her explain herself, to understand how much of our relationship had been real and how much had been performance. More than anything, I needed to understand how I'd let myself become so vulnerable to this kind of manipulation. That evening, I arrived at the restaurant early and chose a table in the back where we could talk privately. When Whippawan walked in, I saw her differently. Instead of the tired, stressed granddaughter I'd been picturing, I saw a young woman who'd clearly had time to prepare for this meeting. Her makeup was perfect, her clothes were new, and she moved with the confidence of someone who was good at her job. Malcolm, she said, sliding into the seat across from me. So good to see you. You look tired. Everything okay? I need to ask you some questions, I said. Of course. What's wrong? I pulled out the folder Greg had given me and placed it on the table between us. I hired a private investigator. Her face went completely still. For just a moment, the mask slipped, and I saw calculation in her eyes as she processed what this meant. Why? She asked quietly. Because some things weren't adding up. The hospital visits, your work situation, the medical bills. What did you find? You tell me. Is your grandmother really sick? Whippawan looked down at the folder, then back at my face. For a moment, I thought she might try to maintain the fiction, come up with explanations for the discrepancies. Instead, she surprised me. No, she said simply. There's no grandmother. How much of it was real? None of it. The hospital visits, the cancer, the medical bills, all fake. I'd been expecting this answer, but hearing it said out loud still hit me like a physical blow. The photos? Stock images from medical websites. The receipts? I made them. Took me a long time to get them right. The late-night phone calls? The crying? Acting. Each admission was like a small knife wound. All of it? All of it. I sat back in my chair, processing the full scope of the deception. Why? Because it works, she said, her voice matter of fact. Foreign men want to feel needed, want to feel like heroes. Give them a way to rescue someone, and they'll pay anything. How many others? You really want to know? Yes. 7 in the past 2 years. You lasted the longest. How much money? From you? About 300, 0 baht. From everyone. Maybe 1.5 million total. The numbers hit me like a sledgehammer. Jesus. I know you think I'm a terrible person, Wippawan said. But let me explain something. You know how much money I made working legitimate jobs here? Maybe 12, 0 baht per month if I'm lucky. You know how much money Western men spend on bar girls for one night? Sometimes 10, 0 baht. You spent 300, 0 baht, over 3 months, for emotional connection. For some men, that's 1 weekend of drinking and sex. That doesn't make it right. No, it doesn't, but it makes it understandable. I looked at her across the table, really looked at her for the first time since we'd met. She wasn't the sweet, struggling granddaughter I'd been imagining. She was a professional, someone who'd turned emotional manipulation into a career. Did you feel anything for me at all? You want honest answer? Yes. At first, no. You were just another lonely old man with money. But after a few weeks, yes, I started to like you. You were kinder than most, more respectful. But not enough to stop taking my money. No, not enough for that. Why not? Because this is my job, Malcolm. This is how I survive. Getting emotional about clients is bad for business. Clients. That's what you are. What you always were. The honesty was brutal, but I appreciated it more than continued lies would have been. What happens now? What do you want to happen? I want my money back. Wippawan laughed, but there was no humor in it. Money is gone. Spent. Sent to family. Rent. Living expenses. You think I keep your money in bank account waiting for you to ask for it back? Some of it then. I don't have any of it. Your family then. The people you sent it to. My family thinks I have rich foreign boyfriend who helps with money. You want me to explain to them that boyfriend was actually client paying for fake grandmother cancer treatment. I realized she was right. The money was gone. As completely as if I'd lit it on fire. There was no recovery, no legal recourse that wouldn't cost more than I'd lost in the first place. So that's it. You just walk away. What else you want me to do? Say I'm sorry? Promise to pay you back someday? Tell you I've learned my lesson and won't do this again? Would any of that be true? No. Then don't say it. We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, the restaurant continued its normal evening rhythm. Couples having dinner, friends sharing drinks. Normal people living normal lives, while my world quietly collapsed. Can I ask you something? Wippawan said finally. What? Why you never questioned anything earlier? You're smart man, worked in insurance, know about scams. Why you believe everything so easily? It was a fair question, and one I'd been asking myself. Because I wanted to believe it. Because being needed felt better than being lonely. You paid 300, 0 baht to feel needed. Apparently. Was it worth it? I thought about that seriously. For a while, yes. I felt more alive in those 3 months than I had in years. I had purpose. Someone who depended on me. Someone who appreciated what I could provide. But now I feel like an idiot. You're not idiot. You're just lonely man who got taken advantage of by professional. Happens every day here. That doesn't make me feel better. Not supposed to. But maybe helps you understand this isn't about you being stupid. It's about you being human. Wippawan stood up to leave. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not sorry enough to give money back, but sorry that you got hurt. Wait, I said. One more question. What? The beach party. Last Tuesday night, when you called me crying about your grandmother's setback, you were actually at a party on Pattaya Island. Yes. How could you call me crying about a fake grandmother dying while you were laughing at a beach party? Same way actor can cry on command during filming, then laugh with friends between takes. Is just work, Malcolm. None of it was real. She walked away without looking back, leaving me sitting alone with the wreckage of my own desperation. The money was gone, the relationship was revealed as pure fiction, and I was left to figure out how to rebuild some sense of self-respect from the pieces. But as I sat there, I realized that the hardest part wasn't losing the money. It was losing the feeling of being needed, of having purpose, of mattering to someone. For 3 months, I'd felt like I was saving lives, being a hero, making a real difference in the world. Now I was just another lonely expat who'd been separated from his money by someone smarter and more desperate than he was. The worst part was that even knowing it was all fake, part of me missed it. In the days after the confrontation, I tried to return to my normal routine, but everything felt hollow. The apartment that had seemed like a comfortable refuge now felt like a prison. The bars and restaurants I'd enjoyed exploring felt pointless without someone to share them with. Even simple activities like reading or watching movies felt like distractions from the crushing realization that I had no real purpose here. I found myself obsessively checking Wipawan's social media accounts, even though I knew it would only hurt me more. She'd blocked me on Line and Facebook, but Instagram was still accessible. I scrolled through photos of her with friends, at work, living her normal life as if our 3 months of intensive contact had never happened. In one photo, she was at the same beach party where I'd been calling her about her fake grandmother. She looked genuinely happy, surrounded by friends, without a care in the world. The contrast between that image and the crying granddaughter who'd called me that same night was jarring. I started drinking more than usual, not enough to be dangerous, but enough to dull the sharp edges of humiliation and loneliness. My expat friends tried to console me with their own stories of being scammed or manipulated, but their sympathy only highlighted how common this experience was. Happens to everyone eventually, said Jim, an Australian retiree who'd been in Thailand for 5 years. I got taken for 80, 0 baht by a girl who needed surgery for her mother. Turned out the mother was fine, and the girl was saving up for a new motorbike. The trick is learning to enjoy their company without getting emotionally invested, added Frank, a German who'd been married and divorced twice to Thai women. Treat it like entertainment expenses. But I didn't want to treat human connection like entertainment expenses. I didn't want to become cynical about relationships or assume every interaction was transactional. The problem was that I no longer trusted my ability to tell the difference between genuine connection and professional manipulation. 2 weeks after the confrontation, I was walking through Central Festival when I saw her. Wipawan was sitting in the food court with an older Western man, probably in his 60s, someone who looked exactly like me. She was listening to him with the same concerned expression she'd used with me, nodding sympathetically at whatever story he was telling. I watched them for several minutes, hidden behind a pillar, observing the performance I'd been too emotionally involved to recognize when I was the target. The way she touched his arm gently when he seemed upset. The way she asked careful questions that drew out more information. The way she managed to look both interested and slightly overwhelmed, as if his problems were becoming her problems. It was masterful, and I felt sick watching it. The man was clearly smitten. He leaned forward when she talked, hung on her every word, seemed completely absorbed in whatever crisis she was sharing with him. I wanted to walk over and warn him, explain what she was doing, save him from the financial and emotional devastation I'd just experienced. But I didn't. I stood there watching someone else fall into the same trap I'd fallen into, unable to intervene without looking like a bitter ex-client seeking revenge. As I walked away, I realized that Wipawan was probably very good at her job. She'd identified my vulnerabilities quickly and precisely, crafted a scenario that maximized my emotional investment, and maintained the performance flawlessly for 3 months. From a purely professional standpoint, it was impressive. From a human standpoint, it was devastating. That night, I called my daughter in Ohio. We hadn't talked since the divorce was finalized, and our relationship had been strained even before that. But I needed to hear a familiar voice, to remember that I had real connections somewhere in the world. "Dad?" Sarah sounded surprised. "Is everything okay?" "I'm fine. Just wanted to hear your voice." "That's unusual for you. Are you sure you're okay?" "I've been better. How are you doing?" "Good. Busy with work, but good." "How's Thailand?" "Complicated." "What does that mean?" I found myself telling her the whole story. The loneliness after the divorce, meeting Wipawan, the fake grandmother, the money, the investigation, the confrontation. Sarah listened without interrupting, which was more than I deserved, given how little attention I'd paid to her problems over the years. "Jesus, Dad, I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Be smart. Learn from your old man's mistakes." "How much money?" "About $10,000. Could have been worse. Could have been better." "Are you okay financially?" "I'm fine. It's not about the money anymore." "What's it about?" "I don't know. Feeling stupid. Feeling lonely. Wondering what I'm doing here." "You could come home." "Home to what?" "An empty house in Ohio, and memories of a failed marriage." "Home to family, to people who actually care about you." "Do you care about me?" The question hung in the air longer than I'd expected. "Yes," Sarah said finally. "Even though you weren't the best father, even though you missed most of my childhood because you were working, even though you and Mom made each other miserable for years, you're still my dad." "I wasn't a good father." "No, you weren't. But you weren't a terrible person. You just didn't know how to connect with people. I thought I was learning how here." "Maybe you were. Maybe this woman taught you something about what you need, even if she did it for the wrong reasons." "What do you mean?" "You said you felt needed, right? That helping her made you feel valuable?" "Yes. So maybe the lesson isn't that you're stupid for wanting to help people. Maybe the lesson is that you need to find legitimate ways to feel needed." "Like what?" "I don't know. Volunteer work? Teaching English? Helping other expats avoid scams? There must be ways to make a difference that don't involve sending money to fake sick relatives." After we hung up, I thought about what Sarah had said. Maybe the problem wasn't that I'd wanted to help someone. Maybe the problem was that I'd been so desperate for connection that I'd ignored obvious warning signs and failed to protect myself while trying to protect others. The next morning, I started researching volunteer opportunities in Pattaya, English teaching for poor children, building houses for tsunami victims, environmental cleanup projects, programs that helped expats navigate Thai bureaucracy legitimately. There were dozens of organizations that needed help, needed volunteers, needed people with time and money and skills to contribute to actual causes. Real problems that needed real solutions, not fake crises designed to manipulate lonely foreigners. I signed up for an orientation session with a group that taught English to children in rural villages outside Pattaya. The work was unpaid, demanding, and required a significant time commitment. It was everything my relationship with Wipawan hadn't been. Transparent, accountable, focused on genuine need rather than emotional manipulation. On my first day teaching, I stood in front of 20 children between the ages of 8 and 14, all of them eager to learn English, all of them genuinely grateful for the opportunity. No fake medical emergencies, no manufactured crises, no hidden agendas. Just kids who wanted to learn and a teacher who had something to offer. "Hello, Teacher Malcolm," they said in unison, their pronunciation careful and proud. "Hello, students," I replied, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. It wasn't the same as being someone's emotional savior. It didn't provide the intense intimacy of late-night crisis calls or the addictive satisfaction of solving someone's desperate problems with money. But it was real, sustainable, and based on genuine reciprocity rather than manipulation. 6 months later, I was still teaching, still volunteering, still learning how to be useful without being used. I'd heard through expat gossip that Wipawan was still working the same scam with different men, refining her techniques, probably making more money than ever. I didn't feel vindictive about it anymore. She was good at her job, and there was apparently endless demand for what she was selling. Lonely men would always need to feel needed, and smart women would always figure out ways to profit from that need. The trick was learning to meet that need in ways that helped rather than hurt, ways that built rather than exploited, ways that created genuine value for everyone involved. I was still lonely sometimes. I still missed having someone depend on me completely. But I'd learned to recognize the difference between healthy connection and addictive codependency, between generous helping and desperate enabling. Most importantly, I'd learned that the best way to avoid being manipulated was to stay engaged with the real world, with real problems, with real people who had genuine needs that could be met through honest effort rather than money transfers to fake medical emergencies. Wipawan had taught me something valuable, even if that wasn't her intention. She'd shown me exactly what I was hungry for. Purpose. Connection. The feeling of making a difference in someone's life. The fact that she'd sold me a counterfeit version didn't invalidate the genuine need it revealed. Sometimes I still thought about her, wondered if she ever felt guilty about the men she'd manipulated, if she ever considered that her clients were real people with real emotions rather than just walking ATMs. But mostly I tried to focus on the present, on the kids I was teaching, on the legitimate ways I could contribute to my adopted community. It had cost me $10,000 to learn the difference between being needed and being used. Some people would say that was expensive education. I preferred to think of it as tuition for a masterclass in human nature, taught by one of the most skilled practitioners I'd ever encountered. The money was gone forever, but the lesson was priceless. Real connection can't be bought, only earned. And earning it requires patience, wisdom, and the willingness to help without expecting to be worshipped in return. I was finally learning how to do that, one English lesson at a time.